So I'm so glad to be here. Can you hear me? Is this okay?
Yes.
I don't need the mic?
No.
All right. I'm going to read maybe one tiny piece and then a story. Maybe two tiny pieces. This is the last I wrote something called an essay, My Last Day, and it was a collaboration with Arnold Kemp, a wonderful artist at the Second Floor Projects. We were talking about that earlier, so I picked this out to read. So, okay, My Last Day has 3 sections. This is night. The loss of collective experience is regained with the development of the interrupted sky. The photo by Carlton Watkins, I read it through the eyes of Kathy Acker. The perfection of the combination of male and female. And so without tension, the ideal landscape of the West, empty, boring, and ecstatic. Several images I read through the eyes of Kathy, an art forum project. How the photos are male, female, without tension. That is beauty, Kathy observed about an androgynous young man in Japantown, polished. Let me in, cries the skeleton, banging at the mirror. You are in, I say. The skeleton bravely shoots dead groups. A disaster has already taken place, as though a deathbed held him against me. The skeleton is animated. Attend his micro-expressions. Face in the digital age. It snarls. The camera sucks my dick. I laugh, afraid it will hurt me. Non-being calls to me, but it's my words that have the stale quality, the phrases of the undead. I say in my dead voice, if there is no more sense, there is no more nonsense. And that, fellow citizens, my flesh opens and closes like a bivalve. Deep staleness and lack of wonder. This writing is not exactly for itself, and not for you either. Not for me, and not for language. It's not a natural process, though it's not so different from sky effects. In that sense, these words are sculpted more than spoken, out of sheer space, in a region without shape or gravity, a waste marginal, not owing life anything, without responsibility to life. Folks, the past is an archive. The examination of conscience is an exercise of memory. What a wonderful thing it is to be an American. We are able to forget everything. Our systems expire. We are not on the brink, and we are not between, and we do not owe space our presence. This page is where I can be weeping on the floor disconsolately, and yet typing at the keyboard, where I can see my face reflected in the screen. If we feel compassion for ourselves and for you, it is not so much that I feel compassion, as that compassion is a kind of language or commerce that does not waste good suffering. And perhaps its Arctic speech unmistakes the night, though we do not owe you clarity. Okay, here's a tiny poem. It looks like this. See how small it is? Okay. It's called Phantom Objectivity. When I have done the worst I can, my cheese becomes a little god. Thumbtack and acorn, sawdust and shame, the little things of house and home. When I have done the worst I can, my little cup becomes a ghost. 2 white horses draw its hearse.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're allowed to clap.
Yeah.
I wanted to read this. I put together a book of essays. Semiotext is going to publish it the year after next, actually. So I came up with all these random essays that I've forgotten I wrote. This is also just a tiny piece. It's called Queer Voice. It was for an art show called Queer Voice. It was for a catalog. And, well, queer voice is a conceptual mud puddle, yet I recognize it when it hails me. It must somehow express our culture's problem with deviance, and at the same time it must contain male becoming female, and female becoming male, and male becoming male for a male, and female becoming female for a female. Long ago my queer body was dense with homosexuality the disease, and homosexuality the crime. Isolation at that intensity is a form of violence, is it not? Sex is a sacred act, and by that I mean it takes place in public. In every sense, queer sex is more public than most. In Frank O'Hara's Personism, a manifesto, even the language that speaks about language is eroticized. Quote, as for measure and other technical apparatus, that's just common sense. If you're going to buy a pair of pants, you want them to be tight enough so everyone will want to go to bed with you. And it puts the poem squarely between the poet and the person, Lucky Pierre style. Lucky Pierre is in the middle of a three-way. We are told that before the 19th century, there were homo acts, not homo identity. So no queer speech. Somewhere in one of John Boswell's histories, the Renaissance, the late Middle Ages, he notes a piece of contemporary advice. One way to identify a sodomite is that he likes to eat well. What will we wear? What will we eat? So no homo identity, but homo dining. During World War II induction physicals, tests were administered to identify men who suppressed their gag reflexes. So no asking, no telling. When I look at the sky, it becomes a homosexual sky. When I sit in a chair, it becomes a queer chair. I exhale queer atoms. As for masculinity, I go through life assuming I am pretty neutral, that I am not easily identified. When I hear or see myself on tape, I think, oh my God, what a big fag. So this is this odd little story. I've never known what to do with it. I wrote it long ago for an anthology of gay fairy tales. And I don't know, was that a promising idea or not?
Yes.
Gay fairies, always good.
I really actually never know, it never appeared in any of my books. It's sort of like this sport. I don't know what to do with it. It's about the Folsom Street Fair. It's sort of written under the sign of Tom Gunn, who's a dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
And there's a line from Tom's poetry in here, embedded in here. when I was a kid, I loved fairy tales, and the one that I especially loved was called The Glass Mountain. And this was just this very random story about this woman, beloved object that everybody adores, is sitting on top of a glass mountain, and people have to figure out how to get up to her, and if they don't, they slide down and die. Princes are trying to get up to her. So it's this unobtainable love object, and I guess this story is kind of a miniature version of my work in general about sexual obsession. Okay. I'm at the Folsom Street Fair, 3 hazy city blocks. Can you hear me still back there?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm tired of pushing through bodies, tired of trying to possess and contain with only the strength of my eyes the men who attract me. I look up the steep slope of the glass mountain, but I can't see what. What can I not see? The reason many of us came to the fair in the first place. Then the murmuring crowd parts as though my will to see him equaled his desire to appear. He has a caved-in, haunted look, a hollow in the center of his chest. His neck is too thin, too long, his butt is really too big. Perched on the glass mountain, he does not seem preoccupied with himself or aware of his effect on others. In fact, he looks hungry for company, a little scared, and maybe that's why he does not appear to recognize us. Hungry for friendship, lonely for sex, sketchy, unused, and fearful of being used. How can he commit to the moment, give himself to the moment, when he never did before? Which moment? Which one becomes a welter of choices terrifyingly embodied? You look at him, there's that old familiar swelling. The increase in blood flow is pleasant. You are a little drunk, but not unduly. You smile foolishly and don't care. And maybe you let other men touch you. It's all right. They are attracted to your arousal even though they haven't caused it. Your arousal is a private door to the public. It's just a warm-up and they know that. God bless the leather community. They know that sex should be one of the practical arts, like crochet. With its fantasies of wings, flowers, and pineapples. You are making a little spectacle of yourself, climbing onto a glass foothill of your own. You are available, sure, but your feelings point upwards. So it's an incomplete experience you are offering these strangers rubbing your crotch at a street fair, because you look away from their interest with a smile. You are not committed. You hardly note the hard-ons you incite or on helpless bodies, or even the 10 fingernails digging into your behind. You are beautiful. That makes you applicable in a general way. Your excitement honors the man of the mountain. You don't stop thinking about him. What about him? I can't imagine. His glassy expression and his howdy-doody lips hung in a slack smile as though he's beauty on a float. His big butt. You are petrified yet throbbing, swollen beyond the possible, like the last surge before the first spasm. When you are that sensation, even lust is distracting till that tension is broken. So you head towards the glass mountain. What can you do? The fog burns off and the crowd mingles promiscuously, which is Tom's line. Mm-hmm. You are dressed and naked. You reach the first slope and he notices you. That's okay, but you can't really make a dent. You can't get to him. He's considering you with that tilted gaze, as though from a distance, from above, and you are sliding down on what? A snail trail. The yammering flesh does not subside. Excitement amplifies your bitterness. Nothing of you will endure except a bleached bone, which death cannot soften, and you are alone as you acknowledge many who lie with you, littering the bottom, wrapped and rotting, glowing like plutonium, poisoning the earth with longing. There should be an ecology law against fucking up the environment with glass mountains.
Yeah.
The mountain is hidden. It's transparent, but visible because it distorts the world beyond. It's a window on this side of a disaster, a skinny brunette. Void and plenitude invite a closer look. Naturally, I'm curious, so I move forward to see what breaks all these strong necks. He doesn't look like much. Someone else's version of handsome. Brown hair and brown eyes, a little howdy-doody with full lips and a toothy smile. But then he senses my scrutiny and turns away abashed. He looks back, squinting into the sun, and I see he's uncomfortable, always uncomfortable, and I wonder if I can help make him feel less unhappy. When he turns his head to the side, cast downward like a Madonna, certainly he is beautiful, and his unhappiness seems to give me access. It's something he's giving me, the knowledge that his actual beauty is based on sadness. So I can say, "Hi, what's up?" He responds formally, hand outstretched as though we were being introduced. "How do you do?" At the same time, his bare flesh, paraded all over Folsom Street, makes him seem sluttish, accessible in a meaty way, like why not just fuck? In this moment, my life is bound to the axis of success or failure. Success is release or arriving at some kind of unity. Because I am no longer inside, I can reach myself only through the medium of a brittle young man whose shadow touches what it falls on, the grass rising after it as it passes. It's fun to gather myself into the precinct of my groin. And I sort of stand back from this piece of the natural world attached to my front. A thing from Wild Kingdom, stuck to my body, softened by TV and reading in bed. Or a column of rock candy. It's tasting itself. The flavor is sweet. I witness this estrangement with a laugh of recognition, a scientist observing the progress of a disease in his own body. The elements of my life break into two, every permutation of doubleness, audience and actor, stoic and hedonist, victim and thug, speech and silence. I'm already halfway up the cliff. I could use my dick to make footholds, but I'm afraid of shattering the entire mountain because it's only made of glass. This street fair is devoted to rough beauty. He affects a rough, airbrushed look, French Vogue. But it's not only sight, it's also the salty hair in his armpit, the lake odor of his breath. Anguish makes me throw out my arms, extravagant gestures of need, marathon masturbations amplified by tears. They don't take the pressure off. I have that post-jack-off interior pallor, yet sweetness persists like a chronic dessert. I dribble ice water on my boner just to cool it off. I am not even interested in boners. I feel seedy, tired, ashamed. He seems barely conscious of all this drama, or he does acknowledge it by tilting his face. Though I also interpret that as an offer of white neck and clavicle. When he turns away, his gesture occurs inside of me gigantically. He's a giant instead of skinny and short. I have a right to complain, but he crosses his chest with his arms to defend his heart against sudden proximity to a stranger's feelings, which he did nothing to instigate, as he reminds me with regret. The sun is sinking, and I'm pinned to the glass mountain. A black cloud scuttles by, and I beg for a drop of water. The cloud sails past, and not even a drop moistens my cracked lips. The young man who controls everything thinks that to provide relief would be to sign a contract. He's upset by my distress. I look down into an abyss of failure so intense it becomes lust. It's almost dark, the endless congestion of tissue and sensation, the revolting enthusiasm of the undead. In a daydream, I amputate, cover the wound with salt, and graft my penis onto my forehead. But I instruct myself as though pointing to a blackboard, it's already a phantom limb. I don't begin with any luck, but somehow I get some. My daydream puts me to sleep, and I slumber as though safe in bed for 8 hours. When I wake, it's still dusk, rather windy. An advertising blimp sails by, dragging out of its moorings by the wind. Margaritas, $3. It shows you how long ago this was. You can't park your car for $3. Okay. I grab hold of the strings, and the balloon carries me up on one gust. I've gotten high on margaritas, but never on an ad for them, though the Calvin Klein billboard above Times Square affected me. I have an inspiration. I pretend that it's just a lark. I'm laughing and joking with him. I'm on a little joyride. He's relieved. I'm not so intense. We're just two dudes kicking back. A few of those advertised drinks. I'm already intoxicated by the wonder of lounging on his bed, our legs casually touching. He's hairier than I would have guessed. As we talk, I realize he's a different person. He has parents, 2 brothers, a sister, constellations of friends, social intensities that begin to bore me. Yet he's sketchy too, untouched, maybe a little dumb. His body is loose, hands on the pillow, above his head, ankles crossed, all chest and groin. I try not to look obvious as I rejoice, already grateful for what's about to happen. I don't even start it. Pleasure is the only character which we support from our different altitudes. Now that he's sure our relationship is meaningless, he puts his hand on my thigh. The silence deepens towards the actual. I feel explosions of tenderness. I want to heal his famous unhappiness that so attracts me. I push his head back with exaggerated kisses, and at the same time I want a rebate for my own suffering through ferocious sex that erotically dismantles him. First my tongue, then my fingers, and now my cock are inside his amazing flesh, a courtyard full of flowers. He's utterly pliable, but only that. And I am dazzled by sheer access. He cries out, increasingly the lament of the wronged innocent. Pleasure itself dragging him out of the distance into the prison of feeling. He's groaning deeply as though I'm destroying him in a horror movie. I feel great. Would it be too much to say that his body becomes my cock? That his excitement belongs to me, a treasure that can't be saved but only spent? He's afraid he's going to come too soon. What's going on? He's on his hands and knees, face mashed in a pillow, butt hoisted in the air, and I am penetrating him with rich contentment. I have one hand on his palatial rump for stability, and his belly is a little distended as though to fit into my hand. I'm so amazed I'm laughing. Then I stop mid-stroke, freezing the frame. He waits a moment or two, a question in the air, then moves his ass back onto my cock in one mouthful, dilating and clamping without a struggle. His butt pushes against my groin, almost nuzzling like a dog eager to be walked. My body remains still. He sees how it is. The plot is turned over to him. His hips start pumping blindly, and it's a moment of triumph. Of course he's only following the directive of his ass, more pleasure, but he's also announcing a need, if only for pleasure to continue. He's undulating back and forth, sort of fucking himself with my body, so you could say he turns into an ass, an active one, turning me into a dildo. His mouth is squashed in the pillow. His butt is a point of connection, if not union. We coexist around a length of a few inches of skin. This is enough to bind us to the luxury of the present. My ruinous obsession should produce stoic insights to make a human comedy. I'm not against this idea, but it depends on a reduction of excitement and physical resources. I do not subside. The glass mountain ripples in the air. I am alive and doing fine. At night it's cold, so we share heat under the blanket. I can't return to Earth, but why should I? It was a false home, and now at least I am truly homeless. Thank you.